And I'm going to tell Julia that we are going live so she can confirm. Okay. So I think we're live. Welcome everybody. My name is Kristen Thompson. I am one of the owners of Itinerant Literate Books. I am here in the back room of the bookstop. So you can see it's very glamorous. And it is very glamorous because I get to be joined by two wonderful authors, thinkers, and just all around just very impressive and fabulous ladies. Shafia Zaloom and Natalie Walton. Natalie we're joining here today on her birthday, by the way. So happy birthday to Natalie. I'm so glad that Crystal told me that. I was going to try and orchestrate everybody in the chat singing you happy birthday, but I realized that could get just very convoluted. But maybe we'll give a prize to anybody who puts some good birthday gifts in the chat. Anyways, so Natalie is the author of Revenge of the Sluts, which there have been so many great comparisons of it's like The Swallows, but for young readers, like Nancy Drew on a mission to rid her high school of toxic patriarchy, which I think is a noble effort as well. And Shafia Zaloom is joining Natalie in this conversation since the book covers really meaty, weighty subjects that are very real. Shafia is a sex ed expert and health expert, a lot of work with young people and young adults. And so I'm very excited to hear this conversation and to dig into what this book could mean for young readers as well as adult readers. So thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And tell me, so where are both of you located right now?
I'm from Delaware.
Okay.
And I'm in San Francisco.
Okay, wow. So we are truly bi-coastal and crossing not hemispheres, at least the Mason-Dixon. So anyways, so the book, Revenge of the Sluts. Tell me about what drew you to this story and in this way for this readership, because I know you have you host a sex positive podcast as well. So like the subject matter seems like a natural progression, but why specifically in this way?
Yeah, it started off, I did not realize at first that sex ed was like my big thing. When I was first writing Revenge of the Sluts, it was very much kind of this like, I want to just write a book kind of about like slut shaming and kind of female empowerment and something where we can read it and just kind of be like, yeah, like, all right, let's like do this, let's get going. And I think that was kind of the main goal of the book, was kind of writing like a You Go Girl kind of book, but also one that really taps into real social issues and how to kind of actually solve them in a structural way. And then I think as I was drafting the book, I started to realize that what it came down to was trying to find big solutions so we could talk about it all we wanted at kind of a ground level and how to handle interpersonal one-to-one issues, but we needed something more. And I think sex ed is one of those where it's just, if we talked about these issues, if we gave them definitions, if we explained them more clearly, basically everything that Shafia does, we might be able to see positive change, and we hope that we see positive change. And so far, the research has indicated that we can kind of go in a positive direction with it. So I'm very much like a kind of pro-sex. Like the book didn't start off that way. It was kind of more of like a general, and then as I was writing it, I think developed a personal goal.
Did you have any experiences in like specifically engaging with adults as a young person? I mean, because you're so old at the moment. So as a teenager in particular, did you have any experiences with adults? This is a leading question because I know I definitely did, as at least people in positions of power who just didn't quite get what they were doing and what they were perpetuating. Was there any kind of real life drawn from that?
Yeah, when I want to say it was in like 8th grade or something like that. I remember going, no, actually, I think it was younger, maybe like 6th or 7th grade. I remember going to like a guidance counselor and being like, hey, there's this like, thing going on. Like one of the classmates I'm with is like being kind of weird. I don't really know what the situation is. And her immediate response was like, well, okay, he probably has a crush on you, so we'll deal with that. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, it's like, isn't it more than that? She's like, well, if we try and like dig into it more, like I'm gonna have to just like tell your parents. Like, do you want me to call your parents? And I was like, no, like that's not what I'm trying to do here. Like, this is not that was not the response I wanted. So I think it's just like things like that where it just kind of added up, where it was like, you have that moment when you're in like, sixth grade. I was like, 12 years old. And then, basically not having sex ed classes, watching things like, games like, excuse my language, but like slap ass going on and things like that growing up, where it's, you're kind of just like, what is happening? Like, why are
Mhm.
we letting this continue? And why is it that the adults in our lives see them and aren't saying
Mhm.
anything? So I think that was a huge part of it. Kind of just like, what is going on? Like, what can we do? Like, there must be a solution to this.
Right. That, and like it's possible to have that feeling as a child and just knowing that something is wrong, but you don't have the skill set to deal with it. Shafia, I'd love to pivot to you on that. So it what brought you into this work?
Well, I am actually really old. And so, like 25 years ago, I started as a social worker and was involved in pretty intense interventive work with teenagers. So, dual and triple diagnosed in residential treatment as an alternative to incarceration, and drug addicted, but also had experienced a lot of sexual harassment, assault, abuse, and perpetrated it. And so, when that was pretty taxing work, and I realized, reflecting upon my own life, in which relationships in school were so influential and important, that I wanted to get into prevention, and that education would be the way to do that. Because a lot of the kids who I worked with, exactly like we said, like had no positive adult in their lives to guide them in terms of, this is what you can expect. This is how we treat each other. It really matters. This is how to manage what's going on. This is how to step forward and advocate for yourself and take care of yourself if the adults aren't, that sort of thing. And so that led to health education. And I've been doing it ever since. I'm about 25 years in. And like Natalie said, the sex ed became my specialty by default. So I'm a health educator. I speak to a lot of different topics and where sexuality intersects with a lot of other things. But, about, I'd say 15 to 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I started having kids of my own. And so my schedule just determined that I would be teaching the sex ed class at the school I was at. And that started. And then about 7 years ago, I was asked to write a companion curriculum guide for the documentary film The Hunting Ground, which is about sexual assault on college campuses. And that garnered some media attention, which led to more. And then suddenly my consulting business boomed. And now I go to different states and work in different schools and teach consent and healthy relationship education to, mostly middle school and high school, all over the place. So that's how I ended up. And there's a big demand, there's a need, because the sex ed in our country is actually pretty abysmal. Only half the states require it. Only 13 of those states require it even be medically accurate. And only 6 to 8 of those states actually require consent be a part of that conversation. So most kids are not getting any sort of medically accurate sex education from credible resources. And so that's why I love this book, because I really think it provides. So given that parents are really the primary sexuality educator in a child's life, and even with great sex ed, that would still be true. But it falls on us as parents then to have conversations in meaningful ways with our kids about these topics. And a lot of parents don't know how to do that. Even the most accomplished people really have no idea, because no one did it with us. And so, generally speaking, every now and then I come across somebody who actually had some pretty quality sex ed, but we're pioneers in all of this. And so that's why I wrote my book, was also to be a tool, not only to provide information for young people, answering the questions that I was getting over and over again when I would teach, but also for their parents to get insight into what's really going on and how to teach kids to manage it. And then that's how Natalie and I got connected. And I love this book because it's a great way to start those conversations. It's really concrete. You can talk about the characters. It doesn't have to feel so intense and intimate and personal because you can talk about something else. And Natalie has woven in so many nuanced and intricate, yet very important relationship dynamics, high school culture dynamics that are just so meaty and that you can dig into to discuss this stuff with your kid. So that's what I really love about it and why I think it's incredibly valuable as well. And it's a good read, for sure.
Yes, that definitely helps.
Yeah. Hopefully she'll read the opening. It's like my favorite thing. I saw the first, I'm just flipping through it like, okay, I got to read this. And then I saw the opening. I was like, no, actually I need to sit down and start. So I hope she'll be able to share a little of that with us today too.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience, and I realized. So I wanted to get a little bit of context for you both, and what brought you here before kind of flipping the way we usually would do this, or give the synopsis first and then go with that. But I think this is such a. I think the context really matters. So Shafia's book is called "Sex, Teens, and Everything in Between," and after hearing that description, and yep, there you go. You're such a good hype girl. So good. I could definitely see a world where there's a circuit of like one school reads, and then the parents, like the PTA. So the kids would read Revenge of the Sluts, and then the PTA would have to read Sex, Teens, and Everything in Between, and then they have to talk to each other. I think that would be an amazing program. So perhaps
I love that idea. And we could get, both Natalie and I with the different books, we could get them up and do them in different ways. I think that's a great idea.
Well, take it away. So that brings us to, so I just want to give a quick overview of the Revenge of the Sluts, because I do think we have people joining us who hadn't pre-registered, so they may not have gotten our many email reviews and descriptions. So I'll give my very quick description again, like I said, without giving too many spoilers. And then Natalie, I'd love to ask you about some of the nuance or what you think people might miss based on some of that. So Revenge of the Slut centers around a group of high school age girls and young people, and their intimate photos are leaked by who knows who, and they're the lead reporter of the school, which I love her name, Eden, is such a great name, and I loved that in the marketing materials from the publisher they sent the article. I just thought that was such a nice touch, which we can share that around. We can share that after the conversation. But basically, Eden isn't having it. She wants to hunt down what's happened. Meanwhile, all of these victims, are dealing with the aftermath of their entire school and family and everybody around them suddenly having an impression of them that they can't control, and they weren't even given the opportunity to control. And there's lots of dynamics between the group and then outside of the group. And then Eden has her own dynamics, which are really interesting. Her love interest. Oh my gosh, I'm terrible with names. Sorry. What is his name? Atticus. Thank you. Anyways, there's lots of really great meaty relationships going on, but at the heart of it, it felt to me very much a really honest look at the different ways that we can react and deal with that kind of violation, and how much it can force introspection as well, and especially at that age where everything is so raw, and you might not want to think about those parts of your life because they feel like the future, or those parts of yourself yet. So yeah, sorry, that was a lot. It's just like I've been having lots and lots of thoughts about this book, because I don't think that anybody has. There's no such thing as a typical teenagehood, yet I think that we're always comparing ourselves to what some big ideal. So yeah, from there, maybe we can start with some of the characters. Who was the most fun to write, or the most difficult to write?
Yeah, I think Sloane was definitely one of those characters where every time she showed up in the book, it was just like really fun. Like it just made sense, and she feels very natural, I think, in the book and in the scenes that she shows up in. I think she can be like just a really like interesting character, and just someone where you kind of like cheer for her just inherently, even when she is someone who can be a little bit kind of closed off and a little bit challenging to get to know. I think there's something kind of about her that's very naturally like charismatic, which is really interesting because it's, she's not the narrator, but she's someone who I care very deeply about, and I think you can tell through the book. But yeah, and then what's interesting is I think the most challenging character by far was writing Luke and trying to kind of explore his dynamic a little bit. He was a really difficult character to want to write and a really difficult character to want to get in the head of. Just if there's anyone who has read the book, if anyone hasn't, he's kind of like a villain. I don't know how to really describe him properly. It feels weird to kind of like simplify him down to just being a villain. It's a little bit more, I think, like complicated than that. But he just, I don't know, it was just very unnatural for me. It was like I had to tap into kind of like the worst parts of myself, or the worst like things that we hear, or the terrible gossip, or all of the like, he embodies kind of all of that. So it was definitely an interesting process figuring out how I wanted to write him.
It was an interesting, it makes so much sense that was a hard character to write, and maybe not like the one that you were most excited about writing those scenes, because it was almost like in the scenes with him, and in the way that you learn things about him, it's like, I had a really good analogy for this like an hour ago. Of course it's gone, but he seems like he's going to be a red herring, but then like he's still not great. Like there's still so much. He's dynamic and complex, and I think what made it so rich to me was that it made it very clear that there are actions are very morally defined, but the people who make the actions are very morally are dynamic, and everything is situational, but that also doesn't mean that's an excuse to not have empathy and consideration for others, just because you can argue yourself out of anything. So yeah, there is a whole lot to pick apart with those interpersonal relationships, for sure. I think I can't believe I didn't say this in your bio, and I'm so sorry about that. This is by Wattpad Books. I'm sure that several people joining are aware of Wattpad and aware of you from Wattpad. So I'm curious and for those of you who might not know what Wattpad is, it started off as a almost like extended chat boards where people could write books and engage with authors. And now it's become this real powerhouse place of discoverability, both for readers and for writers. And there's an amazing social component to it. So how do you think that came into, like, thinking back on what this book turned into? How did that play into it?
Yeah, I think what really helped fuel it. So I wrote most of the book kind of offline. Like this was like a totally different project from anything I'd ever worked on before. So I was a little bit kind of like nervous. Like the book felt deeply personal to me. And I was just like for the first time, I think I felt that fear of like, oh, I'm like sharing a piece of myself. Like I'm not just like producing something or like just putting something out there for fun. Like this feels more like I'm actually writing a book, and this book is going to define me in some way. So it was like after a certain point, I was like, you know what, I want to share it. I want to see what people have to say about it. Like we'll kind of just jump in. And there were so many overwhelmingly kind of like positive responses to it, not necessarily positive in the sense that people were like, like people did enjoy reading it, but it was positive in the sense that people got it. Like they understood the book and they understood the content of it. And I think it was really helpful to know that other young people are feeling the same way. Because I mean, the majority of the people who are using the website are probably like, I can't remember the demographic off the top of my head, but I want to say maybe like 16 to like 24-ish, like kind of that range. So I feel like it's primarily skews young. So it's a bunch of people who are commenting and they were like, yeah, like this happened in my high school or this happened, or like there would be genuine like debates going on in the comments and things like that. And I think that was just a really helpful driving force to make me feel like the book did have meaning of some kind. Like it wasn't just me speaking into a void. It was like something where this really deeply resonated with people and at least kind of started discussion.
What's also interesting about that is that I think that people tend to, I have had this tendency. So, and I've encountered parents have this tendency as well, that like the cutoff for what YA can be and what's appropriate. And I think, knowing that the demographics on Wattpad in particular really do skew young, especially in developing countries, skew very young. And they're having this meaningful engagement with this content and with the story that there's I just don't think we give teenagers enough credit, personally. Which I feel like Shafia, you might have some good insight on that in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that as parents, when it comes to these sorts of things in particular, we have to allow kids to be experts of their own experience. And a lot of times, and anybody, and I always say, kids need an environment free of shame and judgment and ultimatums to share with open honesty, but that's true of any of us. And so, when it comes to teenagers, what I love about the book is that it provides this sort of diverse range of personalities and dynamics and relationships, identities, that in which a lot of different kids or a lot of different parents can see their own kid or just connect in some way. And I appreciate that. And also there's some debunking too, when it comes to gender and other things as well that are really important. But that when it comes to this stuff, kids have a power that none of, us adults have, which is that they know what's going on when the adults aren't around. And so it's really important that we actually talk less and listen more, that we are composed and open and genuine with our curiosity, that we're going to suspend our judgment and really listen to what kids have to say about what they're thinking, feeling, observing. Let them be the sociologists of their own experience and of their own and their peers. So that one, the conversations you are having are real and they're relevant. And two, that we actually give kids credit and express that we believe in them. I mean, that's ultimately when we see kids making more positive decisions, is when they can see their best selves in our eyes. I mean, and I think anybody who has a teenager knows that you can speak to the teenager who is moody and has mood swings and messy and trying to figure out how to be responsible and all those sort of things. Or you can talk to the teenager who is making good choices, really thoughtful, creative, caring, empathetic. And they both exist within the same person, but a lot of times who shows up is the person you speak to, right? Through adolescence. And so I think making the conscious choice as parents to speak to that kid, not to dismiss or to invalidate that that's a very real part of adolescence, like that sort of trying to figure stuff out, wrestling with all kinds of things, teen angst. But that doesn't have to be the one we focus on all the time. Like we have to be supportive and provide tools for navigating that. But there's this whole other beautiful aspect of adolescence that sometimes we forget to highlight and honor. And so I think when we give kids the opportunity to be experts of their own experience, we gain a lot of credibility and we learn so much.
I want you to talk to every adult I've ever known. Ever. You started off this comment with just this bombshell of amazing truth, that being experts in their own experience. I love that. That is such a good way to frame it. And I just thank you. That was great. I am curious, kind of in light of that. and thinking about how these characters are dealing with such a difficult situation personally, as well as the dynamics with adults. Was there a specific or which character did you relate the most to, Shafia? I'm curious.
What I've shared with Natalie, and as we have these book talks and have these organic conversations, what I also love is that there are different types of adults in the text, and there are adults who are true allies and really take the time to listen to kids and want to elevate youth voice and help kids, encourage kids to be successful in what they're passionate about and what they're trying to do, even if it's not how an adult would do it. And then there are other adults who are just beholden to certain legal things and stuff like that they're trying to work with, who can't actually be that person for the kids. And then there are adults who are like, really, come on, be better for them. And so the adult I really liked was Natalie helped me. She's the advisor for the paper.
You're testing my knowledge too.
I know. So she's Mrs. P. It starts with a P, right?
Pulaski?
Yes.
Something like that. I want to say
it starts with a P. Miss P. I'm just going to say that.
I do have to say this makes me feel better because I'm like, I can usually only remember the like very center character's name of any book I read. So it's very validating to know that the author also forgets the names.
Oh yeah, I was like, she's just always kind of the guidance counselor in my mind. I don't know. I'm like, yeah, all right. She helps.
She does. She was such a kid ally and advocate. And I just really appreciated that because what she did the most was she listened. Like she was so good at listening. And I think she's an incredible role model for adults. And, there were some other characters who I feel like could have learned a lot from her. And even though they couldn't do the same thing she did because of the positions they held in the school, they could have had more of her vibe. Like she just has that vibe. And there's so many of us have an adult like that who we remember in school, who had such an influence on us, who was such a positive role model, who was an unsung hero, who behind the scenes was doing everything they could to elevate kids' voices. And I really loved her. I thought she was fantastic. Thank you for creating her. And she exists. She exists in all schools. And that's the thing, in lots of different forms of adults. And, and those qualities transcend gender and all those different things too. Like those people exist in our schools. And so I think also, honoring those folks with writing a character like this and how they really connect with the young people was huge. They're in many ways the reason why so many young people actually get through high school. It's a gauntlet and it's challenging. And they are part of the reason why your kid gets through. And a lot of times parents don't even know who that person is to be able to say thank you. So I liked that character, Miss P.
That's a really interesting point. And just kind of sad but beautiful thought of these people that enter into your life and you don't really even know the impact they make until they're gone. Natalie, what was it like writing that character?
It was really, it was actually a little bit challenging for me trying to figure out how exactly to write her. So I think with all of the adults and trying to capture kind of different dynamics, like I didn't go into the book thinking like, oh, every character is going to play like a very particular role. They all kind of fell into these positions naturally. And I think for her, what I really like is the development that she goes through. She kind of starts off almost as this like, okay, maybe we should follow the rules. Like, let's not push boundaries too much. Let's make sure we're listening to what needs to be done. And then I think as the book progresses, she starts to realize kind of what is most important. And, she kind of almost learns the same thing that the kids do, which is, it's okay to step forward and kind of be like, you might be the authority figure here, but I don't like what you're doing. And I think that's just a really important kind of lesson to learn. And it kind of shows that doesn't stop at any age. Like you can still learn how to do different things and learn different skills and kind of tell people like, this isn't okay. Like you can't treat me like this, even as an adult.
I didn't struggle with the book, but I struggled trying to think about how to engage with your statements, because it is so good at bringing you right back to being that age, but not in a traumatic way, honestly. Like, even for being such a difficult, I think every young girl, I'm sure this is also, young men, and anybody would have this fear, but especially in the early 2000s, at the advent of the cell phone picture, that was a huge fear, that something would be misunderstood, misconstrued, or stolen, and that you'd have no control over it. And so it just struck me continuously as reading it that it didn't feel traumatic to read. But it did feel like it was good. It just was very good introspection generally for myself. So I do think that a lot of adults would enjoy this as well. Sorry, I'm checking in on my chat monitor. Okay, we are good. Sorry, thought they said they had to leave. They don't. Okay, this is what happens when you run a virtual event during a pandemic. You have to have people in different parts of the city trying to convene over a live that has a delay. So it's a lot of fun. It's lots of entertaining fodder for, I'm sure, our viewers to make fun of me for in particular. Okay. So as far as the, we do have a question. Never mind. I will, which is good because I had like a half-baked thought, so I can let it cook a little bit longer. Okay, we have a question coming in. This question is for Shafia. Oh, I thought it was a copy. Okay.
No, I can't see.
Okay, here we go. Sorry, it was just taking, the computer was freezing up. For adults who aren't necessarily teachers or parents, is there any concern about overstepping a parent's authority?
Yes. So there's parenting adults, and then there are really positive role models in a young person's life. And I think context is everything when it comes to relationships, and that's something we have to teach our kids and role model for them. When it comes to how people are raising their children, I mean, this is so true of sexuality education in general, too. Being an ally, I think what happens is, and where adults, and forgive me if I nerd out a little bit on psychology,
That's our lifeblood. That's what we
adolescent psychology. But we make the mistake sometimes of just imposing advice and giving advice instead of guiding kids to discover within themselves what they want to be doing and how they want to be doing it. And true empowerment of young people. So if you're genuine and sincere in your intentions and really want to support and help a young person, I think it's really important not to constantly be just like giving advice, your perspective, all that sort of stuff, because then they just become dependent on you, versus ask them really like good questions that inspire self-reflection so they can discover that within themselves and then are empowered with that skill to be independent and to be able to make better choices that honor who they are as individuals. And how we do that is by asking questions. First of all, stay away from why. If you ask why, you've already made a judgment. So, don't put anybody on the spot there, but like lead with how, what, where, when. How do you think that would make them feel? What would it take to make the situation different? What is it that you're actually going for? How do you think, what are the different ways you could get there? How do you think that would make people feel? How do you think the impact of that would be? Is that different from your intentions? What are the potential consequences? Like really asking those important questions that don't lead to yes or no, but lead to self-reflection and exploration. And I think that's really how we empower young people. And that goes for any adult in a kid's life, especially someone who isn't in their home, because then, kids will take into account the values that are in their home, the relationship they have with their folks, and they'll start to form those sort of independent thoughts in a way that's helpful. If a child's safety is ever of concern, of course, it's really important to step forward. And I would actually speak to other adults who actually do have more direct contact and responsibility for kids. So, other parents, teachers in a school, a friend of yours who works with young people and is a counselor. There are a lot of hotlines out there too that you can call to run things by people if it really is like a more intense safety issue. And in that case, then it is important to exercise that, like, I am the adult. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. Boundaries are important in all relationships. And when it comes to sexuality in particular, it's a tough one because sometimes, I truly believe all parents are doing the best they can with what they've got. And sometimes as parents, we're all fallible and we're human. I have 3 kids. I mess up all the time. I eat humble pie every day. But it's like, so where do we draw the line? What are the deal breakers, right? When is it that a child really needs another adult's help because the adults in their home or who are taking care of them aren't able to do so in a healthy way? And in those cases, I would consult someone professionally. I would consult someone who has not necessarily a professional, but someone who has professional experience, right? Like, so you don't have to go seek that out formally, but start to talk to other folks who can be trusted to provide good guidance and ask you those same questions. Like, what is your intuition telling you? Would you talking like this to a kid or doing something like this to a kid compromise their relationship with their parents? Those sorts of questions. It's really about becoming an expert and asking good questions from a place of genuine curiosity. But if safety is a concern, someone's mental well-being, health, safety, then absolutely I would consult others who are trusted and can give you more professional advice.
I think that's, yes. Ask the expert is always, I think, a good thing to lean on. And what you said, coming from a place of asking good questions, is the perfect transition to the thought that I finally was able to fully form to ask you, Natalie. There, something that is, I think, it's a good trope for this format, but I'm curious if that's how you were approaching it or if it was really more character driven. But the journalism at the heart of this, and Eden as a journalist, there is I think for teenagers in particular, it can be really difficult when you see an adult not admitting that they've messed up and trying to be the expert. And journalism is like the antithesis of that. The point is to just ask questions and get to the truth, no matter what. And so I thought that was a really great driving force, but it takes a certain kind of person to be that. So can you just talk a little bit about that for Eden as well as for the book, and kind of like what made you want to position it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the one thing for me is, like, I grew up around newspapers. Like, my dad works in advertising, so we would get the newspaper delivered like every morning. And I didn't realize that it was like weird that I'd read the newspaper before school until I was like well into high school. Like, I was like, oh, that's okay. So we're starting from that point to begin with. And we didn't have like a student newspaper when I was in high school. So for me, I got like one weekend of each year when I was doing some sort of like external program, basically. And that was like my one. And I had that same drive that Ronnie and Eden do, where it's that very aggressive, like, this is it. Like, this is the way of communicating something. This is the way that I can advocate for people. This is the way to like use my voice and my talents to do something good. And I think I carried that into college when I actually got to be a journalist for the first time. Like, it was like a consistent gig for me. I got to, write an article like once a week, sometimes more. I worked as an editor like Ronnie and Eden too, that kind of idea. But I think the more passionately I felt about journalism and the more time I spent actually in a newsroom, the more I started to understand the difficulties and dynamics of being a journalist, in the sense of like like you have some freedoms and you have some abilities, but there's also people who are kind of above you. And I'm speaking from a student journalist perspective specifically because that's what I have experience with. But there's always somebody who's kind of one step, who's the person who, even if you're externally operated, you're dependent on them for maybe an office space, or you're dependent on them for resources and people to talk to and being able to even write stories in the first place. Like the student newspaper that I worked for was connected to the university. It was external, but it was obviously connected, so the majority of our stories were about it. So if nobody was talking to us about anything, we had to still maintain those relationships because we wouldn't have stories otherwise. So I think just trying to kind of explore that, as well as just the really interesting dynamic of what it's like to be a high school journalist specifically, and the kind of limitations that are put on them. I mean, it's like schools, for any possible reason, just be like, no, we don't want to print that story. Like they just basically have the ability to kind of step in and be like, no, we don't want this in our school newspaper. We don't want you to write about this issue. And I think just kind of exploring that a little bit was something that was really important to me, and being able to kind of expose that in the way that student journalists do significant work. I mean, they hear everything that's going on. They see things all the time. It's, I mean, kids are so much smarter than what we give them credit for. It's like what we've been kind of the ongoing theme of the evening. It's like teenagers know what's going on. They're smart. They're able to kind of spot things. So I think we need to be able to give them that space and kind of advocate for the ability for journalists, and young journalists included in that, to be able to kind of like advocate for themselves, advocate for their school, that kind of idea.
What do you think? Really, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, it really serves the storyline too. Natalie, will you talk a little bit about Kai and how Kai actually becomes an educator through a journalist lens?
Yeah, absolutely. So Eden, kind of throughout the book, is like trying to figure out how to write the story. She's kind of maneuvering around like different issues of I don't know, just being kind of like silenced and shut out and things like that. But she's kind of talking to sources throughout the book. And one of the sources she kind of stumbles upon is actually a college student who's not connected to the university, or not connected to the school specifically, but she's connected to one of the girls in the book. And Eden has the opportunity to kind of talk to her. And she just kind of breaks things down from this external perspective. So she's a little bit of this just kind of character who comes in and is like, this is what's going on, and let's talk about this, and let's talk about what journalism actually means and why what you're doing is so important, but also how to take care of yourself as a journalist, which I think is something we don't talk about that much. Is journalists are people who are witnessing all of this. I mean, they are essentially bystanders in a lot of these cases, and it's just, I don't know, like we have to talk about it more. Like I'm not an expert in it. I don't have a background specifically in, trauma and journalism or anything like that, but it's just something where it's at least starting that conversation and kind of, realizing that it doesn't matter what age you are, these things can still impact you and still really carry on. And it's good to work on them early and have the resources starting young.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious what do you think would be different about this book if the characters had not been teenagers?
That's actually a great question. Yeah, I think a lot of it would be, I think maybe the influence of the parents would be a lot less noticeable. Like, I think for me, going into college and kind of growing up in that environment, it was very easy for people to kind of start to separate a little bit from their parents. There's still kind of this looming idea of like parental disapproval, but I think because it's people who are so contained and so close, and all of the adults kind of know each other, all of the kids know each other, there's just it's very tight and very compact. And I think that's something where it would be like that in real life, but I think high school just makes it so almost like suffocating. Like you can't escape. Like it's your teachers know everything that's going on, your peers know everything that's going on, adults know everything that's going on. So just kind of a community feeling of you can't really escape. And I think that's the big thing that happens when you're a teenager, that kind of in some ways goes away, or just kind of like shifts a little bit in form as you're growing up. But yeah, no, that's a great question. Actually, it's like I know it would be different, but I haven't thought super extensively about necessarily how exactly it would be different because it's in a lot of ways. I think there's things that carry on from high school that we still do even as adults, honestly.
Yeah, it can certainly be hard to. I mean, as much as you feel like a different person every few years, it's those are habits that get ingrained pretty deeply. Um, Kind of related to that, do you think that you would revisit these characters in future work?
Yeah, I've considered it. It's definitely when I wrote the book originally, and like for a long time, I was like, yeah, this is going to be like 100% standalone. Like this is not meant to be a continuation of any kind. Like it's really, and it's very much I view it as a slice of life book. Like it's not meant to give this full sweeping picture. Like it very much is. It starts at the very beginning of the email. It ends when the email is pretty much like they figure out who did it. It's not meant to be, a full story of going to court or even figuring out necessarily how the police are involved or what everyone wants to do or where the girls end up. It's kind of a tightly packed story. So it's I don't know. When I was first writing it, I was like, yeah, okay, we'll keep it tightly packed. We can kind of just let people figure it out. There's a lot of different potential for endings, a lot of potential for discussion, but I really like the characters. I feel very strongly about them. There's a lot of them, but they all carry kind of like little bits of myself or like little bits of people that I know or just like they feel very authentic to me and I've spent so much time kind of thinking about them and constructing them that it's like I don't know if I'm ready to let them go yet. So we'll have to see. I don't have any like concrete plans yet, but I know I feel very like strongly about them and I could spend forever just kind of unpacking each little like detail from all of them.
I have a suggestion. I'd love to hear because I know kids talk about what's going on in other schools all the time. And I know that there would be other schools where they're talking about, did you hear what's going on at at the school? Did you see the article that came out? Did you hear it's Luke so and so? Because they play other schools in sports teams, right? They because soccer, he's a soccer player and whomever else. And then I know from my own experience, I'll hear a lot within our own high school, like, oh, did you hear what's going on at, this high school? We heard this went down and this is how they dealt with it. And then somewhere else at another school. So there could be that revisiting. I'm like, what are the other schools? What's going on at the other schools? And how's everybody thinking about it? You have friends from middle school that carry over. So you go to parties where there are other people from other schools and stuff. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunity for crossover, which I'm kind of excited about.
And there's always a kid or like a group of people who almost only hang out with people from another high school almost exclusively.
Yes.
It's like you have a mole.
Yes. Like you have a mole. Yes. You could do a series about the various moles.
I am very excited about the potential of that. I think it would be so much fun. I would love that. Okay, so I was just going to say before we open up for questions, we've actually answered quite a few of the questions that came through the chat just in our conversation. So I will just go ahead and put this out as the last call for any new questions that may have come up, because we have about 10 minutes left to fill up. So let's see. Let me look at my notes. I was scribbling down a bunch of quotes you guys made because they're all so good. Oh, you could also flash forward to high school, or not high school. I'm sorry, college. That could also be an interesting way for that to work.
Yeah, I was thinking about how it would be. I'm sorry, Shafia. I was thinking about how interesting it would be to kind of explore the post kind of experience because there's so much that happens following just the release of the photos. Like the book is so kind of focused on that, but we're talking like it doesn't end. Like it's not something where all of a sudden it's like everything's over and you just kind of move on. The picture can show up again at any point. It's attached. It's all like it's online. It's shared. It's mentioned in the book like mechanically that it is distributed to other students at other schools and posted online. So I think exploring that a little bit more could be really interesting.
And would serve as a way to discuss real life situations because that's happening all the time in college. For instance, college admissions officers, there are people whose job is designated to look at applicants' social media or to find if they have any sort of a digital presence and what that looks like, if it aligns with their application, if it doesn't, things like that. And then with Title IX and all the national discourse, that's sort of in many ways what my focus is and has been for the last 5 years. And there's so much that happens on college campuses in this regard. And what I love about Kai in particular is that Kai provides language. And we know from the research that if you have language with which to identify, talk about, and name your experience in nuanced and, specific ways, that you are more likely to, your healing and prevention it's so valuable. It's so important. And that it's also an opportunity to provide through experiences ways to manage what's going on with partners, with romantic and or sexual partners. And I think at a college level, you could kind of dig into that a little bit more. That's what I love about the book, is it actually, through this very smart and kind of subtle way, Eden's she's going to end up getting a lesson in self-care, and she's looking to interview Kai. But then Kai provides her with all this language and perspective on support that's out there, how to talk to a friend who's been assaulted, how to take care of yourself if you're experiencing vicarious trauma. There's actually all kinds of valuable information that's in there. So I think you're going to be very busy, Natalie, with your writing career, because I'd love to see also a college piece that really gets into the nitty gritty. My book is all scenarios, so it's not fiction rooted in truth, but actual stories that kids tell me. And the one I'm working on now is college stories. And, I would love a book like this. And I think it would resonate so much with college age kids, is okay, here's what's going down. This is what happens. How can I get insight into how to deal? Because it's a lot, it's intense, and it's a huge conversation. And after the pandemic and all the, what people call in the digital space, pent up thirst and everything else, issues of consent, partying, actually have a kid who's in college on a campus where it seems like there isn't a pandemic and kids are still, up to stuff, which is a whole other thing. But, so there's so much to talk about and be done in that situation with that sort of a framework.
I would definitely read it. Absolutely would read it, because it really is. I feel like in high school, it's like you're being treated like a mini adult. You feel that way. And then college, well, at least residential college experiences, I should really specify that. Because I think it's, different as a commuter college, or if you're working part-time as well. That's really being a mini adult. There are the training wheels. I look back at when I was 23 and just that shock of leaving college and being it really is so different, but it still comes with all of the expectation of behavior and maturity that you just don't have access to all of the time. So I think that could be really, really meaty, and some opportunity to get at maybe some of the darker things that were hinted at. I should have clarified this at the beginning. I read this on the heels of watching A Promising Young Woman. So I kept just being something bad's going to happen. Something very bad is going to happen very soon. And I was happy that was not the case, but it's just further to the point that there are lots of different ways that people deal with this. Mm-hmm. And there's no one right way. Okay, so let me check if I see if there are any other questions. Why is it frozen? Okay, it does look like we did answer all the questions in the conversation. You had Shafia, you had mentioned the opening section. Natalie, I'm not sure if we have time, or if you would want to just give a little bit of a teaser on that.
Yeah.
I would be too embarrassed to try and read that in front of you. It always veers into a weird mid-Atlantic affectation. It's very embarrassing, so I will not do that.
All right. Yeah, I promise it's short, so I won't keep you guys for much longer. But chapter 1, so starting from the very beginning, it had all started with a pair of boobs, more specifically, a photo of Sloan Mirror. I looked at the email that I had just opened, sent directly to me, but not only to me. It had been forwarded in a way that could only be described as unfortunate to the entire student body via a listserv. Regardless of whether or not the original sender had sent it to everyone on the student email directory, which they had, it would have made its way around the student body with record speed. St. Joseph's High School wasn't so tiny that everyone knew everything, but it was small enough that gossip spread rapidly without consideration for the truth.
It's so true. It's so scary when it's happening. It really, I mean, I feel like this whole conversation has been so amazing. Thank you both so much. But I don't want it to be lost on anybody who hasn't read it. Like, it's a page turner. It keeps you going, and keeps you guessing, and laughing sometimes as well. So it's not just one giant meditation on teenage trauma. It is not. Okay, so I think that's I don't have anything else other than lots of thinking to do, which is always the best way to end one of these things. So thank you both for joining us, and we have both of your books available for purchase on our website, for those of you who would like to do that. And I guess tell us your favorite. Let me think. What's my sign off for today? If you could give your teenage self a 3-word sentence advice.
Wow.
It's hard. I'll go first. Calm down now would be my recommendation to my younger self.
Yeah, I think mine was gonna be like please chill out. Like
That's better.
I think that really resonates, in addition to, I was a teenager in the early to mid 80s, and I would have to help myself with the blue eyeliner and hair, big hair. So lose the hair, but then also it's going to be okay. Let go of the drama.
Perfect. Love it. Words to live by now and forever, and in the past. Okay, well, thank you guys very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.
The stream